What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. Today, I am joined alongside JPal NFL, Jackson Powers. Jackson, welcome to the show. We've got a lot to go over today with the NFL draft wrapping up 2 days ago.
We do. It really is the best time of the year. I joke with a lot of my friends who aren't quite into the draft as much that this is effectively my Christmas. So, I love to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of this stuff and I'm really excited to break it down here with you.
Yeah, today we're gonna be going over our winners, our losers, our biggest steals of the draft that we found, and then our biggest reaches that we think happened as well. Jackson, you want to start off with a winner? I have quite a few, but you want to start off with one of yours?
Yeah, sure. My biggest winner of this draft is the Indianapolis Colts. And you look at their board and I think it's kind of similar to just if you gave someone on NFL Twitter the opportunity to draft guys. And I just think it really looks like that would be the outcome here because so many of these guys that are drafted here are guys that, your average Twitter scout was really, really high on. You're sitting at pick 15. What are the odds that 14 offensive players are going to be coming off the board? That puts Latu right into your lap. And that is pretty much everyone's top defensive player on the board here, I think. And I think no one really mocked him there to Indianapolis because I didn't think anyone really predicted he'd be there. What are the odds that the board fell the way it did? And for Indianapolis's sake, this was absolutely perfect. Looking at their second round pick, A.D. Mitchell, I had a mid first round grade on him. I mean, I think he is a very talented receiver, and I understand that there's other reasons he's falling. There's obviously some effort concerns with him, and I did hear rumors that interviewing was not really the best process for him. He seemed a little bit disinterested and kind of turned off to the questions. But, from a pure football standpoint, I think he's a very talented receiver. And I would not be surprised if, even given the recent Michael Pittman extension, I would not be shocked if he comes in and is immediately this team's wide receiver one. That's the kind of talent that I think he brings to the table. And I think the combination between him and Anthony Richardson is going to be a really, really special one. And the other kind of sleeper pick that I found is Tanner Bodolini. I think that this is an absolute steal in the fourth round. I can't remember which GM it was, but there was some GM that was talking about when you're in the draft and you see specific teams pick specific positions, you automatically assume that this is going to be a really good player for years to come. And one of the only instances he mentioned was Colts and interior offensive line. And I think Bordolini is an incredible player to really be adding to this scheme. I think he gets out to space and moves really well, pretty good hands. He isn't the most powerful dude, but I don't think you really need that if you're going to this Colts scheme where you can kind of get up to the second level, climb, and then sort of disconnect your lower body to seal. I think that Bordolini is going to be a really, really good player and at really good value here in the fourth round. So I think the Colts walked away with three very quality starters here. And so I absolutely love what they're building right now.
Yeah, I really feel like as well. They got great talent all the way through day 3. Their 7th round pick, Jonah Lualu, I'm sorry for pronouncing that wrong, the tackle of Oklahoma, 96th percentile athlete in the 7th round. That just shows where the Colts were kind of focusing their efforts. They had the 10th most athletic class in the league this year. And you mentioned Latu, like I said, 14 offense. We've never seen that before. 14 offensive players in the first 14 picks. And Latu, my third-ranked prospect, a lot of people's top prospect on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, you get him. You have A.D. Mitchell now as a player, as a target, as like a weapon for Anthony Richardson. And Anthony Gold, I think, should definitely be talked about a little bit more, too, in this class. I liked him out of Oregon State. He can be a guy. I don't think he's ever going to be like a wide receiver 1, of course, or wide receiver 2 even, but he's good depth for a receiver room that definitely needed some depth beyond some of the top guys. So the Colts were definitely one of my winners of this class too. I'm going to give you another team that I think won this draft, and that was the Arizona Cardinals and Monty Ossenfort in his second draft with Arizona. I really felt like maybe based on the pressure from last year, how he moved down and moved up again, how much praise he was getting from that, there was a chance he would have gotten a little bit too fancy at the top with that 4th overall pick, but he didn't. He kind of stuck with his gut. You could tell he's been wanting Marvin Harrison Jr. for months. He gets Marvin Harrison Jr. I like the Darius Robinson pick as well. A first-round pick, maybe a little bit too rich in my opinion, but really for the edge rusher class, there wasn't really at that point. I don't think there was really anyone I'd rather take over him. And then you get probably good starters in Max Melton. I like Elijah Jones a lot. He got a lot of hype from the NFL draft Twitter community in that final week of like scouting before the NFL draft. Xavier Thomas in the 5th round is a great high risk, high reward player in my opinion. Thomas was one of the top ranked prospects, and I believe it was either 2018 or 2019 high school class. And then he's kind of dealt with some injuries at Clemson. But when he's on the field, he's very productive. I like his ceiling a lot. And getting him in the 5th round, I think, is a steal. So those are kind of some of the picks that stood out to me. What are your thoughts on the Cardinals class?
Yeah, I don't think I'm quite as optimistic as you are. Obviously the Marvin Harrison pick is an absolute home run, but I'm not quite as high on the Darius Robinson move. I don't think that was quite a first round talent, and I understand why the Cardinals would be looking that way. Their biggest weakness on their defense is absolutely that defensive line, particularly out on the edge. Robinson's a guy that can kind of kick in and kick out, and this is obviously a play style that they're very much in love with. I just didn't think he was, the 27th best player on the board. Simple as that. I don't think it was a very efficient draft pick. And given the early day 2 capital that they had, I think it was probably pretty easy for them to get him there. I'm not totally sure what other teams' boards looked like, but I just find it kind of hard to believe that he was deserving of capital this high. The Trey Benson pick is a really interesting one. I was lower on him than most. He is a freak athlete at the running back position. Very, very fast, very hard to tackle, really strong. But I just don't think the vision is there, especially in zone schemes. Like I just don't really see him quickly being able to decipher which holes to take. So that's going to be an interesting one behind James Conner, because that's something that Conner is really, really efficient at. Maybe that's something he can get sort of built into. But I'm kind of a believer that in most cases, I don't believe that a guy who is lacking vision is really able to generate that to a high level at the NFL level. But that's a really interesting one, because I think that's a very high ceiling, low floor pick. And then the other pick that I wanted to talk about was Tip Raymond. Really raw tight end, but I think that's a really good pick. He was my tight end 3 behind Sanat and obviously Brock Bowers. I think he's, not quite the most refined guy, but he's someone that I would love to put into an NFL room, because I think he can be the total package as a blocker, as a receiver. It's going to take a little bit of development, but freak athlete, one of the fastest 40 yards, one of the fastest 3 cones out of the position. I think Raymond could be a total baller if developed right. And you're putting him next to, oh gosh, I'm blanking on who's their young tight end right now.
Oh, Trey McBride.
Trey McBride. Yeah. I loved the Trey McBride pick. I think that this is an awesome guy to kind of throw behind him, because they used a lot of 2 tight end sets between McBride and Zach Ertz, and obviously Ertz is gone. I think Raymond could be an awesome replacement for that.
Yeah, you kind of look at the Cardinals class in general. It's a lot of these low floor, high ceiling players. Beyond, of course, a very safe pick, in my opinion, Marvin Harrison Jr., Darius Robinson, you're betting on the athletic traits there. Same with Trey Benson. Yeah, Elijah Jones has a high ceiling. Xavier Thomas has a high ceiling, but again, low floors for both of those guys. And Christian Jones as well, the tackle out of Texas that they took in the later of the 5th round. So who else do you have as a winner from over the week?
My next winner is the Philadelphia Eagles. And, I look at their first 2 picks. I know you weren't nearly as high on them as I was, but I had Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean each graded as early first round picks. And you're walking away with 2 of the top cornerbacks in this class. That is kind of an automatic win to me. Now, I'm not totally sure that DeJean is going to be lined up at boundary corner. I think that there's a lot of possibilities there with him. I think he could totally be like a Kyle Hamilton type of player. He could be kind of kicked inside, hovering around like a big nickel linebacker. I think he could play in the slot. I think safety is a very real possibility with him. But I think if you're walking away with that caliber of player in the 2nd round, it's a total home run. And we saw a similar guy at a similar position last year fall to the second round in Brian Branch. And so far, that's looked like a total home run pick for the Lions. And I think that could be the absolute same case here. Quinyon Mitchell's a really interesting one. Freak athlete, really great closing speed. Didn't play a lot of press coverage. So that's something that I'm interested to see how well that translates at the NFL level. But, I think regardless, you're putting a great athlete at the position. And this is someone who had really good tape, really good testing, and looked really well during the Senior Bowl. So I don't think that this is going to blow up in their faces by any means. I'm not totally sure where the fit of everyone is going to be yet, but they put great talent in the building. The other pick that I look at is Johnny Wilson. I think you and I talked about this a little bit in the pre-draft process. He's probably going to translate a little bit better at the NFL level if he moves to tight end, just because there's not really any receivers that are quite his size at the NFL who really work out. Great blocker, not a great separator. And I think it just makes it a little bit more sense if you're putting him up against the line of scrimmage. And it would be really great for him because he can play that true Y, where he's in line and blocking, and he also has the traits of a receiver to kind of go out there and separate on some seam routes, some underneath drag routes. So I think that could totally make sense for him. I don't know exactly what Philly's plan with him is, but again, a good talent to put into the building with a 6th-round pick. I've seen a lot of people that were really, really high on the Jeremiah Trotter pick. I don't think I was quite as high on everyone else, but what a kind of a Swiss Army knife at the linebacker position, a very, very serious position of need for Philadelphia. I'm not totally sure how he's going to look, but I think that was 5th round. That's certainly not bad value. So I really, really love what Philly walked away with.
Yeah, I feel like they added talent talent that can make an impact in their first year on both sides of the ball. You talked about Quinyon and Cooper DeJean, of course, in the first 2 rounds, and I would even put Jalix Hunt in there as well, who could definitely be a piece in the rotation. Now, it's a very stacked defensive line room that you have in Philadelphia, but I really feel like Hunt is great depth. You can kind of develop a little bit, and by the end of the year, I definitely think he could be making a big impact. And then on the offensive side of the ball, you mentioned Johnny Wilson, but also Will Shipley in the 4th round was a very interesting pick for me. I'm not incredibly high on Shipley, but I do think this is kind of where he was supposed to go, kind of that middle to late 4th round. I think Shipley, with being behind Saquon Barkley, and I'm blanking on who else is in that running back room right now, but I feel like he could definitely make an impact and kind of be a nice switch from what Barkley's kind of speed. Shipley more is like a power guy and in between the tackles. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with Barkley and Shipley in that backfield. And then Anais Smith was someone that I'm a little bit intrigued on how they're going to use him because, again, you have Browns, Devontae Smith, and some other guys there. And Anais Smith will probably come in as the wide receiver 4 or 5, and he's kind of more of one of those Z-type guys. I'm not exactly sure how they're going to incorporate him in that offense, but they spent a 5th-round pick on him, so they must have a plan for him. So that was the Eagles. Another winner of mine was the Baltimore Ravens. I loved their class. It had a player in it that I know you and I were both lower on, but I love the fit. I love their class overall. Nate Wiggins, I think you were a little bit lower on him than I was, but he was my top corner in this class. They got him in the 1st round at pick 30. Roger Rosengarten, I think, is great value in the later of the 2nd round. Adisa Isaac had a mid 2nd round grade, and they got him in the late 3rd. Tez Walker was the guy I'm just talking about. I had a lower grade, I think a 5th on him. Picked him up in the 4th, but of all the places for Tez Walker to go, there's not going to be a lot of pressure on him with guys like Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews all picking up that short to intermediate range for Baltimore's offense. You can kind of use Tez Walker in the way where he exceeds, and that is the go routes. That is the deep curls. So I love the fit there. And then TJ Tampa as well, who fell a little bit. I had a 3rd round grade on him, fell to late 4th. So what are your thoughts on Baltimore's class? Because I feel like they did pretty well.
Yeah, I think this is also a really good class that we're looking at. Nate Wiggins is a really interesting one. A lot of people had him as their cornerback 1. And I know you and I were a little bit lower on him than consensus. I had a late first round grade on him, but really my only knock on him was that I couldn't really find tape of him going against kind of real NFL offenses. It's all these ACC, very vertical offenses where all he's really covering are goes and hitches. And, in press man coverage, he did a really great job at covering both of those. His hips are super fluid, really great athlete, ran a 4.28 at his pro day combine. And, the speed on him is just incredible. But I just felt that he was kind of untested in a lot of routes that are going to be very prevalent at the NFL level. There's not really any in breakers that he's going against, nothing super sharp. And so I just kind of felt like, if I'm a GM, I would way rather take flyers on, the Terrion Arnolds, the Quinyon Mitchells of the world than someone that I don't really know if he can kind of cover some of those mid breaking routes. And, maybe there's tape out there of him being able to do that, but I couldn't find it. And so I felt, let a different team take a risk on him in the early first. But, I had a late first round grade on him, like I said, and that's exactly where he got picked. I know that he fell due to some non-football reasons. I don't know if you heard this rumor, but I did hear a rumor that he was vaping during one of his pre-draft interviews with the team. And I'm sure that team was not the Baltimore Ravens, because that's probably a move that gets you kicked off of a draft board. But there's some non-football reasons that he's falling in this draft, and I think if he can prove that he is really a press man corner at all routes on the field, and if he's not a toxic player in the locker room, which I don't think he will be, this is a total steal by Baltimore. And I absolutely understand why everyone loves this pick. Tez Walker, that's an interesting one that you talked about. You and I were both a lot lower on him. I had a 6th round grade on him because, you just look at him. He's the definition of a limited receiver, right? You throw him out there. He's a jump ball guy, but there's just no other routes in his route tree besides go route and hitch route. There's nothing there. This is exactly the type of offenses that I was talking about. You only really see Nate Wiggins covering. I remember having to turn off the North Carolina tape because I was like, oh my God, this game is 40 minutes long of film and they aren't running any in-breaking routes. I'm going to go see if there's anything elsewhere.
Yeah.
But, Walker's a really interesting one because I've been complaining for the last few years, like Lamar doesn't really have a true X guy who can kind of go on the outside, go up and kind of snatch a deep ball out of someone's hands. And so you talk about, I love the fit here because I don't think he necessarily needs to be playing every single snap over there in Baltimore. But, you throw him in there on some 3rd and longs, that's absolutely going to be the guy that they're looking towards. And I understand why, because really he excels at the deep ball. Like he can go up and just snatch it from anybody. He's really, really fast. I think he ran a 40 time in the 4.3s, if I'm not wrong. And that's what he excels at. And, he's not going to be on the field to the point where he's going to be super duper involved in the offense outside of the go ball. But that's exactly what I'd want from him. I don't really want him running the in-breaking routes that you're going to see guys like Zay Flowers, guys like Rashad Bateman running. I don't want him taking snaps away from them at those spots. So, I like the Walker pick. They picked him ahead of my grade, but the fit honestly is so good that I totally understand why this would be a super positive grade on a lot of people's boards here. So those are the main 2 picks that I had thoughts on, and I'm a fan of both of them. So
yeah. Baltimore knocked it out of the park again. They've had some great draft classes the last few years. Who do you have as I think this is your 3rd winner, right?
Yeah. So my 3rd winner is going to be the Chicago Bears. And I think they had some pretty simple picks. Caleb Williams at the 101,
Yep.
that's the right pick right there. Getting Odunze to fall to you, I think, is really, really incredible because I had Odunze as the 2nd best player in this class. And regardless of whether you had him or Neighbors ahead
second best player,
second best receiver in this class.
Receiver in this class. Okay. I want to hold on.
Yeah. No, that makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
Whether or not you had Neighbors ahead of him, it's really hard to find 8 guys that should be going ahead of him. And, we'll talk about it when we get to our losers and our reaches, but there are some guys in the top 8 picks that I do not think were good picks, and I do not think we're better players than Romo Dunze.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a home run by Chicago right there. I think I had A+ grades on both of their first round picks. That's not something you see very often. I'm not even going to try and pronounce this name. The Yale tackle. I don't want to try and butcher it. I think that's great value for him in the 3rd round. I think that they needed another tackle. I don't know whether or not they want to keep Darnell Wright at left on the left or right side. But I think either way with him, you can bring this guy in, probably play guard, probably play tackle, wherever you kind of want to throw him on the offensive line. There's enough need there that I think just adding a body like that into the building is really, really sound. And Austin Booker out of Kansas, I think that was a really, really good pick. I don't know how many people are listening to this are fans of Miller football, like you and I are, but this was one of his marked my guys, and they were able to walk away with him in the 5th round. I think he's really explosive, converts speed to power really, really well. And, there's a clear need at edge opposite Montez Sweat. So I think this is a really good pick at really good value. So I love the picks that the Bears walked away with here.
Yeah, I love the Booger pick because you could tell before day 3 happened, Ryan Poles was asked, "Oh, you only got one day 3 pick here. Do you plan on acquiring more picks, whether it be a trade down or spending future draft capital?" And he said, "No, not really, unless one of our gold players or whatever." So I'm guessing that's just how the grading system they use gold players falls to us and just keeps on falling. And it was kind of obvious at that point. He's kind of hinting on Austin Booker. There's some of the other things he said in that press conference. And so when Booker fell to the 5th round, which I was shocked by, I had a late 2 on Austin Booker, and he fell to the 5th round. He probably was my best player available at that point. I would have to go and check again, but I'm pretty sure it's my best player available. They go up, they spend an extra 4th next year to trade up for Austin Booker. I love that pick. And taking the initiative to go and trade up for a guy like that when they're falling is just great, great value and a great job from Ryan Poles. Torrey Taylor in the 4th round, a punter out of Iowa. I do not care. Why not? Why not? Like with the class that they have right now, they had only 4 picks going into Thursday. Like picking up Torrey Taylor in the 4th round, a punter where they did not have great special teams last year in Chicago, and Taylor, he got a lot of practice. He got a lot of reps at Iowa over the last few years. So I think it's a great pick. And I definitely think, I mean, I don't know if like he's in that Matt Ariza tier in terms of strength wise, leg strength, but his accuracy is great. And yeah, I was watching punter film the other day. So Torrey Taylor, yeah.
Yeah, better man than me, dude. I never intend to turn on the punter all 22. So that's good ups on you.
Yeah, he's the only one I watched though. He's the only one I watched. And
I would hope. I wouldn't love to spend extensive time on my board looking at punters.
Yeah, but yeah, so the Bears, great job for them. I also had them as winners as well. And then I'm debating. I had 2 other teams, but I think I'm gonna go with New Orleans here as winners because I like the Fuanga pick at 14. Kool-Aid falling to them in the 2nd round. I had a late 1st on Kool-Aid, so good pick by them. I think he's a great fit in New Orleans as well. You've got some of the older guys, and Marshawn Lattimore getting on the older side, so which is kind of crazy to say, but I don't know. He's not that old yet, but like, he's going to be on that expensive contract. You need to get younger at the position, and Kool-Aid gets you younger at the position. Spencer Rattler in the 5th round. They had 5 day 3 picks and 5 picks in the 5th round or later. Spencer Rattler falling to them in the 5th round is great. Derek Carr, count your days because the Rattler is coming. So, yeah, I like the Rattler pick a lot. I had a 3rd round grade on him. The Bub Means pick was very interesting. He's a very productive receiver at Pitt last year. I heard a lot of great things about him. I need to go back and watch him, but I heard a lot of great things about him and how he was one of the bigger sleepers at wide receiver on day 3. Christian Boyd was a tackle that I loved out of Northern Iowa. Falling to the 6th round is blasphemous. I had a 3rd round grade on Boyd, so getting him in the 6th was great too. What are your thoughts on the Saints overall class?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more neutral on this group than you are. I
Mhm.
didn't love the Fuaga pick. I actually had a second round grade on him, and I think for me it's easy to see him being good and not great just because the athleticism is really great. He climbs really well, but at the tackle position, I think I'm a little bit less worried about RAS score and a little bit more concerned about
Right.
like, in immediate technique and leverage ability, pad level, like the kind of nuances of the position that I'm looking for that a little bit more than other spots when I'm looking at tackle prospects. And I just don't think he quite has that yet. There's often times where, I'm seeing him climb to the second level and he just fails to find a guy to block. Like, it's a little bit like a chicken running around with its head cut off. Like
Mhm.
there's just not a lot of like IQ going into a lot of Fuaga's plays, I think. I understand the, athleticism because he is kind of a mauler, climbs really well. But I don't know. I think if you wanted a guy like this, I would have totally preferred Troy Fatanu, because I think they're very similar players, and I have Fatanu graded a hell of a lot higher than Fuaga. I understand why guys are high on him, but just the way that I look at tackles, that's not really one that I looked at there. McKinstry's an interesting one because I remember you and I talking about him. I had a second round grade on him, and I don't really have too many questions about his coverage. I know that that's kind of been a hot button issue about him lately is his long speed, his ability to kind of change direction. I really don't have any questions about that, but I remember when you and I were looking at him, it's like, oh my God, I've never seen a cornerback who's worse at defending the run.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of people don't really care about that, but being a Seahawks fan and seeing like the difference between Devin Witherspoon, who can go and kind of like destroy someone, and Reek Woolen, who similar to McKinstry, like despite his great coverage abilities, got benched midway through the season. This was a defensive rookie of the year candidate last year simply because he wasn't making enough impact on the running game. And I that's something that I just started to value more and more. And you look at the tape, teams are going so far out of their way to run it to his side of the field because if you can get a running back out in space, McKinstry is not bringing him down, whether he's blocked or unblocked. This dude is a total lawn chair defending the run, and I really wonder how the Saints are going to be able to cover that up. The Rattler pick was one that I really loved. I think back-to-back years the Saints have grabbed the kind of late round quarterback draft crush of mine in Rattler and Hayner. I had Rattler as my QB4, and that's above Nix, McCarthy, and Penix, respectively.
Right.
I really, really like Spencer Rattler. I understand why he fell to the fifth round because the athleticism with him, it's just not there. Like I think he had a 3 or 4 RAS score, and
Yeah.
that's something that's becoming more and more important at the quarterback position as we start to kind of evolve there. And I understand why GMs aren't super excited about that. But I think what he did within the pocket was really, really sound. He tested tight windows a lot more than Nix. That was something that I had a huge concern with Nix about is like, you're not really going out of your way to test some tight throws. Um, but I think he can really rip the ball, and what he does within the pocket, I think is easily going to translate. So, like you said, Derek Carr, count your days because you have entered a room with NFL Twitter's late quarterback
Yeah.
draft crushes in Spencer Rattler and Jake Hayner. So
Yeah.
I think one of those guys is bound to pan out, and Carr obviously is a pretty short leash on him. So we'll see what that looks like in terms of the near future. I also really like the Jalen Ford pick. I think I had a third round grade on him. Really, really raw, but there's a lot of dialogue between the kind of disconnect between NFL and college linebackers. College linebackers are a lot more like safeties nowadays, where they're 220, not really stout run defenders, but they're great in coverage. And I think Ford is a guy that can totally be the more NFL caliber linebacker because that's a position right now that for the last few years has been one of the most lacking in terms of talent in the
Mhm.
league right now. And I think Ford is, really, really raw, doesn't quite have the IQ of a true Mike yet. But I think the movement skills are there. I think he can get downhill and make some really sweet run stuffs. It might take a year or two before, he's a really good player. But I think Jalen Ford could be a total home run pick for the Saints, especially with a guy like Demario Davis starting to age out of the league. This is a great kind of redshirt guy to throw in the building and be a future replacement.
Yeah, I think the Saints class it has a lot of potential. I know we kind of have some conflicting opinions on some of their top guys in the class, but overall, I thought they had a great class. Now, moving on to the teams that did not have a great class, we're going to go through. We'll do two each for our losers.
Okay.
We can talk about the one that we probably both have at the top of our list first.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Uh, the Atlanta Falcons made some interesting decisions throughout the week, and I mean, do we want to? I guess we want to talk about Penix. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Penix
mean, I
made.
mean, I was gonna talk about him in my reaches pick.
Yeah,
But we're getting to him regardless. That's got to be the worst pick of the
yeah.
entire draft. Um, I don't know if you saw, but at their press conference, they defended the pick as basically
I
like
know. Yeah.
we're trying to do what the Packers did with Jordan Love. And,
This.
like, you look at it from a 30,000
Oh
foot
my
view,
god.
and it's just like these are not the same situations at all. For starters, when the Packers picked Jordan Love, they put him behind their, like, Hall of Fame decade plus franchise quarterback. And right now we're putting Penix behind the very recently acquired Kirk Cousins, who's coming off an Achilles tear. Like, those are not the
You
same
don't think Kirk
caliber
is a Hall
of
of Famer? Kirk isn't a
ah
Hall of Famer.
no,
Hello.
I'm not quite willing to
Well,
go
not
that
this
far.
this
I
Kirk
understand he
slander.
was
This Kirk
he was
slander is
the
crazy.
legendary Commander's journeyman at one point, but I don't think that Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers are quite on the same tier
I guess
of,
not. Yeah.
of quarterback. The other difference is like, when the Packers got Love, he was this like 21-year-old freak athlete. We're looking at Penix. This dude is going to be 30 by the time that his rookie contract expires, and he has the knees of a 65-year-old dude. I think he tore his ACL what 3 times? Like,
He tore his ACL twice. He broke his leg twice, and each leg
dude,
twice. There's
oh
a
my
picture of
god,
him in a wheelchair with two broken legs. Like
what is the athletic ceiling we're expecting to get out of this?
yeah,
Like,
it was,
oh
and
my
then he
god,
has a shoulder. He had like strained his shoulder joint or something like
yeah,
that multiple times. Like it was
yeah.
bad. It's bad.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
oh man, it's just like I really don't understand what the like stealing that they're looking at here is. That has to be the worst pick of the draft. Oh,
Yeah,
excuse me. The Rook or
Aurora,
Hororo. Yeah,
Aurora.
I
Yeah,
don't like that pick either. Just because I don't think he's a bad player, but I think there was a lot better defensive tackles on the
mm,
board.
I agree.
I can understand why you'd want to pass up on Johnny Newton just because of the medical concerns, but uh, I had Newton graded as my best defensive tackle on the board. So,
Me too. Yep.
Mason, you guys came away with a great one in
Yeah, I
the
know.
second round.
Yeah.
If he can stay on the field, that's gonna be a total steal. Braylon Trice, that's a guy that I had a 5th round grade on, I believe.
Yeah, I
He
think I had
looks
same
like a
before.
yeah,
Yeah.
he looks like a very rotational pass rusher to me. Like, I don't think that this is a guy that's going to be seriously cracking the rotation. I understand why Atlanta needed it because pass rush has not been, a great trait of
Mhm.
theirs. But I mean, if that's something you want, then go draft, Newton. Go draft Michael Hall with that 2nd round pick,
Right.
and find something elsewhere because that going 2 rounds ahead of my grade on Trice is just that's not a good pick. Those are the main picks that I have, dialogue
Mhm.
about. But I'll let you give your thoughts here because I'm interested to see what you think.
Yeah, the main thing was the Aurora pick over Johnny Newton. You look at that, and then you look at Jalen Rager, Justin Jefferson. That's all I'm gonna say is that like those two picks.
That's really
I'm just
funny.
getting flashbacks. So, yeah, that was again rookie Aurora. I like him a lot. I think I had a late 3 on him. So it's, again, like you said, he's not a bad prospect. He's got a pretty high ceiling in my
Uh-huh.
opinion, but just the players on the board that you could have gone at the time was very interesting to me. Um, Again, I pretty much agree with you with the Braylon Trice pick. Just not really, don't really like him as a prospect. Brennan Dorlus was a really interesting one to me. I don't really know where he's going to kind of fit with this Atlanta defensive line because I think he's more of a tackle And if you've got a Roro, you've got Grady Jarrett there, and then on the outside you went with Braylon Trice. There's just a lot of names there that I'm not exactly sure where Dorless will fit, because I know he wants to play edge, but I'm not sure if he's going to be able to play edge in the league. And then JD Bertrand was a pick I sort of liked in the 5th round, but something I do want to mention, of the 8 picks, half of them were on the defensive line for the Atlanta Falcons, and none of them were in the secondary. So I felt like they need some more help at corner depth wise. You have some of the top guys like Terrell. I know those rumors at the 8th pick they could have gone with a corner at one point. Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion Arnold were both potential guys at
Yeah,
8.
yeah.
But
Arnold was a name that I was hearing a lot
yeah,
at that pick. It would have been a lot better a pick than the guy that
yeah,
they
that
went with. I'll tell you that
yeah,
much.
like I don't know a worse pick you could have gone with that 8th overall pick. I like yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I just didn't really like the Falcons class overall. What other class do you not like?
Let me pull up my notes here. I have the opportunity to choose between 2 here, but
Yep.
I am going to go with the Minnesota Vikings.
Mm,
I don't know what your stance on this class, but I don't really have too much thoughts on the day 3 talent that they went out and grabbed, but looking at their first few picks, I mean, JJ McCarthy, like that's a guy that I had a 3rd round grade on. I know that the dialogue around him is pretty stale because he's been a kind of a hot button prospect since January, right? So
right.
I'm not going to dive too much into that. I just mainly I don't really think that he was worth the 10th overall pick. I think the Vikings is not a bad building to be putting him in, but
Mhm.
that's not a quality successor to Kirk Cousins, in my opinion. And Dallas Turner, that's someone I was really, really low on. I had like late day 2 grade on him. I know a lot of people love Dallas Turner. I understand why, but at 250 pounds, like I would like to see just a little bit of bend, and it's not there, dude. Like just the ankle flexion out of him is it's so stiff. Like I just don't really see him being able to win around the edge. And I know that there's other ways that he can win. Those arms are
Very long.
freakishly
Yeah.
long, and I do trust his ability to kind of convert speed to power at the NFL level. But I don't really trust his bag. Like I would really like to see a little bit more like you got to have more than one way you can win when you get to the NFL level, and I don't really trust that right now. I trust that he'll be a quality run defender. Like not many guys at the edge spot can kind of two gap, but with those arms, he is going to be really really good at that. He'll be a quality like pocket cruncher, but he's a guy that I had the same complaint of Will Anderson. Like I think there's the pressure to sack rate with him, like the amount of times that he is getting pressure on the quarterback is really, really high, but the amount of times that he's turning that into sacks is really, really low. And, say what you will about that. Like pressures are obviously a very positive play, but the way he does it, it kind of opens up scrambling holes for a quarterback to take. And, you're doing that against Mahomes, Lamar, even like a Caleb Williams. Like they're going to make you pay if you're getting to them and not bringing them down. That's not a pick that I saw great value on. So I was not in love with the direction of the Vikings' future in day 1.
Yeah. I had a higher grade on McCarthy than a lot of people. I had a late one on him. I definitely think it was worth a 1st round pick, and especially getting that 5th year option as well. I think because he's more of a project guy, I feel like you'd probably sit him for a year. And again, if you're the Falcons and you're going with a quarterback who is going to not play for the next few years as a project, you don't go with the 24-year-old. You go with the 20-year-old. That's what the Packers did, and that's how you're supposed to do it. Anyways,
Yep.
that's McCarthy at 10. I liked the pick there. I thought it was fine again for a quarterback. Quarterback's value got higher. The Turner pick, I'm not as low as Turner as you are, but I'm not as high as consensus. I think I had a mid 2 on him. So
Okay.
that pick was definitely, it wasn't the best pick, but I just like it didn't hurt as much as probably for you. Kyrie Jackson was a pick that I love, so I'd probably give this class probably a neutral grade, leaning towards being a loser, but like not as compared to some of the other teams I'm gonna
Yeah.
go over. But I
Mhm.
like the Kyrie Jackson pick a lot. He was very impressive with the Senior Bowl. He's super lengthy corner safety guy out of Oregon, so I liked his potential a lot. And then again, the 6 and 7s, I don't really have a kind of opinion on them. But another team that I felt like was kind of losers was the Jacksonville Jaguars, in my opinion. I don't know where you stand on them, but I felt like they reached on a lot of players. I didn't really like the Mason Smith pick. I felt like there's better tackles you could go after instead of him, there was a tackle that went right after him that I loved. I forgot who exactly it was. Let me pull it up real quick. Chris Jenkins. I felt like Chris Jenkins was a
Yeah.
better pick than Mason Smith there. Jerry Jones, I felt like was a little bit of a reach, and same with Javon Foster too. So I just felt like they kind of reached on a lot of these players. And yeah, that was kind of the main thing. The Thomas pick was whatever. I think that's fine. But
Yeah.
yeah. There wasn't
Yeah,
really
that's
any talent on day 3 as well that I loved.
yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't really have a ton of thoughts on this class, mainly because, like, most of them I just didn't get around to watching. But the Thomas pick, I think I'm a little bit more. I'm viewing it a little bit more in a positive light than you are.
Mhm.
The ability to kind of trade down and get, I think, the guy who was very clearly going to be the fourth receiver off the board. Looking into this class, obviously it was going to be Odunze, Marv, and Neighbors as the first three. And I think there was a lot of debate as to who was the fourth best receiver in this class, but I think it was pretty clear from a ways out that Thomas was going to be the fourth taken. And I love Thomas. I had a mid one on him, I believe. And so Jacksonville being able to trade back and get him at a very clear position of need, I love that move. I'm a lot higher on that than I think a lot of people. Mason Smith, I didn't watch him, but I do know that I really liked Chris Jenkins, and passing up on that for a guy I didn't watch is probably not the best take.
Yeah.
But I shouldn't really be developing too concrete of opinions before I go watch him. So there's plenty of post draft reviews that I intend to do, and that's probably going to be one of them. But we'll see. I don't really have as many thoughts on this draft class as you do. But yeah, I am a fan of the Thomas pick.
Yeah, I think it was just more underwhelming. I felt like I don't think any of these players are like certified busts or whatever, like should be taken
Mhm.
3 or 4 rounds earlier than they should have been. But I just felt like it goes over. You have this guy available, but instead you go this guy, which is, I mean, it's fine, but like, is that the right choice? I didn't think so. So who's your next loser?
My next loser is the Dallas Cowboys. Let me
Interesting.
pull
Wow.
them up. Yeah, I really did not like what they've got going on here. Tyler Guyton was, a really interesting pick. He probably was the best tackle on the board, but I think he's just like I kind of talked about it earlier. When I'm looking at tackles, I'm less concerned about athleticism and more concerned about the technique that they bring to the table now. And Guyton is kind of like the antithesis of what I'm looking for there. Like, very athletic, very raw project. I understand he probably was the best tackle on the board, but the Cowboys have enough needs that I feel like you're kind of pigeonholing there. I would have loved to see them go, receiver, linebacker. Like, there's so many other spots that they could have gone with. I thought that was a really bad pick. The Nealand pick is interesting because I did have him as kind of a sleeper, but I don't know that late 2 is
Yeah.
quite worth it for him. I think that he's more of a third round, fourth round guy that you get really excited about. I think that they're just he clearly was one of their guys, and I just think that they're reaching on him a little bit. I do like the BB pick, but I
Mhm.
think with what's his name? The guy
Peter Song.
Seattle picked, Christian
Oh,
Haynes.
oh
Oh,
yeah. Mhm.
well, Jackson Powers Johnson was not on the board, unfortunately,
No.
at this point, as much as I would have loved to see it. But I think with Christian Haynes on the board, that's a guy I would have rather grabbed. I don't know
Mhm.
exactly, maybe it's a scheme thing, but I think it's looking in terms of just best player on the board. I would have loved to see Haynes be the pick there.
Mhm.
And again, I don't really have too many thoughts on their day 3 class, but I just thought that their first 2 days, this is a team in a really weird position right now. Like, they kind of talked about they're not going to extend Dak. And it's just there's so many question marks about where the team is headed. And I don't think this really answered anything for me because it didn't seem like they had a clear direction with where they
Mhm.
wanted this team to go. And like a lot of these guys aren't really going to be helping them now with what like while Dak is still under contract. So like maybe they're preparing for life after Dak, but no, I don't think that is a very good move. Like I understand that there's playoff concerns with Dak, but he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And we're talking about like a 3-game sample size here. Like
Mhm.
I just I really don't think that they're moving in a positive direction.
Yeah, it's hard to get a quarterback better than Dak right now. Yeah, there are quarterbacks currently in the league better than Dak, but it's hard to get one better than
Yeah.
Dak right now, just because there aren't great quarterbacks in the world. Like that's just what it is. Like, you
Yeah.
probably have what, maybe 10, 11 max. You could probably call like franchise guys right now, and that's what, uh, not even a third, about a third of the league, which is pretty crazy. So the
Yeah.
one pick I liked on day 3 was Ryan Flournoy out of Southeast Missouri State. I saw him at the Senior Bowl. He was in the same wide receiver room at the Senior Bowl as Johnny Wilson and Xavier Legette, and I felt like he was quiet. He quietly had the best week of those 3 guys in practice. So he was. I can't remember the exact corners that were in that same like group or whatever, but he was winning a lot of his one-on-one reps, which again, you can't really. I didn't watch his actual. I didn't watch his actual tape yet, but the just what I saw at the Senior Bowl, again, you can't take that much out of it because those drills are meant for wide receivers to win. But I was kind of impressed. Sorry, out of a guy that like I didn't really hear of beforehand. So that was kind of the one pick that I really liked. But I kind of agree with you. There's just not anything substantial that's going to make an immediate impact, I feel like, with this class. Guyton's kind of a project tackle. Now, the Guyton pick, I've is more of a you look at Dallas historically drafting first round offensive linemen, and they've done a very, very good job recently. So that's why I'm not trying to grade that Guyton pick too harsh. I kind of
Yeah.
trust the Dallas offensive line evaluations over the last few years. So that's why I feel like that's a fine pick. It's definitely a Dallas pick to select a guy like an athletic tackle like that. And then
Mhm.
some of the other picks, again, don't know if they're going to make immediate impacts with this team. So, and they didn't go with a running back, which kind of assumed Zeke is coming back, which it sounds like. But that was also something that was a little bit interesting. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I think, yeah, that was any others. I think that would be each one too. But any others you want to mention before we head to biggest
No,
steal and biggest faller?
that's all I've got.
Yeah. All right. So my biggest steal, we kind of went over some of these guys already. My biggest steal was Austin Booker. I had him as a second round grade. Ended up in
Okay.
the 5th round. Great move by Poles to move up for him. And then my biggest faller was, my biggest not faller, but reach was Tyron Hopper. I didn't really I watched him a little bit. I had limited tape on him, so I can't really like be concrete because there was not that much tape on him. But I had a 6th round grade on him, and he ended up. I think that I can't remember the exact team that drafted him. Was it there was a certain team? Was the Packers? Yeah, it was the Packers. Ended up drafting him in the 3rd round. So I just felt like there were better linebacker prospects. Most notably, I think Cedric Gray was still on the board. I love Cedric Gray a lot, so that was kind of my biggest reach. How about
Yeah.
you?
So I've got 2 for each.
Hmm.
My biggest steals, both of these guys are players that I had first round grades on, and I was definitely one of few. But there's a guy we've talked about a lot, Braylon Allen to the Jets. I
Hmm.
absolutely love what he brings to the table. This is a dude that just turned 20 years old. He was 19 for most
Youngest
of
player in
the
the draft.
pre-draft process. So, him going to the Jets behind Brees Hall probably doesn't speak to what I think like the role
Mhm.
that he deserves. But I think he could totally be like the AJ Dillon over there. That's probably exactly what's going to happen to him. Then the other guy is Junior Colson. I find the Chargers often steal the linebackers and the edge rushers that I want, and Colson was
Yeah.
one that I think it's very possible that Seattle did try and trade up for him because I know that John Schneider said that there was a guy that they did try to trade up for, and maybe it's the McDonald connection. Maybe it's just me, wanting to believe that they were in on my guys, but
Yeah.
I think it's very possible that Seattle tried to trade up for Colson. I talked about it earlier. Like, there's a huge disconnect right now between the NFL and college linebackers, and I think Colson is one of the few true guys that like I think could go in and be a star at the Mike position. So I love what the Chargers did there because that's a huge position of need for them. God knows that Eric Kendricks and Kenneth Murray.
Kenneth
Oh my
Murray.
God, that is just nightmare all 22 right there. Like
Yeah.
it is so bad. My biggest, I mean, I talked about it. Penix, obviously, biggest
Mhm.
reach. I'm sorry, Mason, but I'm not a fan of the Daniels pick. I think
Yeah.
with May on the board, that was,
Valid.
I mean, Daniels was a guy that I was super duper in on in like Thanksgiving. Like I was
Mhm.
like, this is like we're in like quarterback one contention here with
Yeah.
Daniels. And then the more I started to kind of like watch him and look into him as a prospect, he kind of became pigeonholed as my QB3. And
Mhm.
I cooled on him for the entire draft process. And like taking him over May, like it's just insane to me. You know, I think there's a lot of people who agree and a lot of people who disagree with that, but I just don't really understand how you know look at all the circumstances with both of them and you even watch the tape with both of them and decide that Daniels is the better quarterback. And I know that you were definitely pro May. I don't know how you feel about that pick. But
I
yeah, I it's not one I'm a fan of.
Yeah, I gave myself 10 minutes, and then I'm a pro Daniels now. So we're on
Yeah, there
the
you go.
Daniels offensive rookie of the year train right
Yeah.
now. So that's where we're standing. But
Yeah.
yeah. So the Daniels pick definitely hurt a little bit. I definitely like 3 days out from the draft. I was like, okay, this is a smoke screen. 2 days out from the draft, I'm like, okay, this is a smoke screen, right? And then one day, and I was like, okay, I need these lines in Vegas to start moving because like this is getting too close now.
Yeah.
And they ultimately, I woke up draft morning, I was like, okay, the pick is gonna be Daniels, and I kind of just like settled on it. And yeah, so I mean, it's whatever. I still had a first round grade on Jane Daniels. I definitely
Yeah.
think there's a
Yeah,
lot
I
to
did
like
too.
about him. The mobility, the deep passing is something that's great about him. He's got like the best. He throws the best soft fade in the entire draft class by a good margin, in my opinion. And a lot of other things to like about him, although there are definitely some things to worry about as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah. So that was just kind of my thoughts on Daniels. But yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah. Any other thoughts on the draft or any other storylines you want to go over?
Yeah, I remember you talking about I mean, you know, you talking about how getting really close up to draft day, you thought it was gonna be smokescreen. I was kind of propagating on Twitter this whole like conspiracy theory that I don't know if you saw
Yeah,
it, that the Commanders were like basically lying about wanting
yeah.
to go Daniels so they could get the Giants to pay the Kings ransom to
Mhm.
trade up with New England, thinking that May was gonna be on the board.
Yeah.
That was that was my kind of conspiracy theory, and obviously it blew up in my face, but man, I would have felt so cool if the Commanders had gone regardless of whether or not
You pull
anyone had
that off.
traded up to 3 and been baited, but,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I would have thought that was so funny.
Yeah, I was just thinking like at one point, all right, if this is a smoke screen, this has to be like the best smoke screen in NFL history
Yeah.
at this point. Like we're getting
Mhm.
I on draft day, I was like, we're getting to that stage where if it's not him, he's sitting right like I don't know, Vegas knows stuff, it doesn't know stuff, but at that time it was his like I don't know, it was like probably like minus 700 or 800 at the time, and like it kept
Mhm.
on dropping. And I'm like, okay, this has to be either the best smoke screen in NFL history or we're actually picking Jane Daniels. Which one is more realistic here?
Yeah.
And so then I kind of just settled with it. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully Seattle can do some things with their draft class and Byron Murphy and
Yeah.
the rest of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, where can people find your stuff and your work?
Yeah, I think just JPOW NFL on Twitter. We got a couple other things in the works right now, but you know, I'm not really doing anything on TikTok anymore. Not doing much on YouTube.
Yeah,
Twitter's really the main place you're gonna find me. So it's at JPOWNFL.
yeah. Congrats on getting drafted, Las Vegas.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited.
uh, yeah, excited for that one. That'll be it for this week's episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. See you guys next one. Peace.